Thank you all for joining us this morning. My name is Max Delman. I'm an intern with the Montana World Affairs Council. We're excited to have you all with us. Before I introduce our guests, I do want to thank our council and the classroom sponsors for our event this morning. The Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, Allegiance, First Security Bank, Frail West Bank, Stock Bank, and Northwestern Energy. Today's water program is also sponsored by the Cutter Foundation. To get us started, Dr. Hussein A. Amery is one of the world's leading experts on global water issues and food security. He is an associate professor of international studies at the Colorado School of Mines and has served as an associate provost of the university and as director of his department. He has expertise in a variety of fields, including water and food security, human and environmental security, and transboundary water conflicts. He has published several books and papers on these issues with a focus on the global potential for war over water, water management in Lebanon, and conflict resolution along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Our second guest today will provide a more local perspective on water issues. Jennifer Schoonen is the Blackfoot Water Steward with the Blackfoot Challenge, a nationally renowned watershed organization headquartered in the Blackfoot Valley of western Montana. Jennifer has overseen programs that focus on community-led drought management, irrigation efficiency, soil health, water quality issues. Jennifer has overseen programs that focus on community-led drought management, irrigation efficiency, soil health, water quality issues, and collaborative watershed stewardship. And with nothing more to say, here's our first guest, Dr. Hussein Amery. Just slide it in front
Thank you for the kind introduction.
You're welcome.
And good morning. You all there? Okay. How you doing this morning?
Thumbs up if you're doing great.
It's 12.34.
Oh,
This way.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. We're going to talk about water this morning.
Chances are you'll have less work.
On a rainy Montana day, we're going to be talking about water. I'm going to start by talking about the global water issues, and then I'll talk about some Middle East specific water issues.
Mona, can I have you mute your microphone, please?
Yes, pardon me.
That's okay. We're getting a lot of scuffling of chairs. Thank you.
So, like I said, I'm going to be talking about some global water issues and then talk about some Middle East specific water issues. Water issues are things that the global community is very interested in and have been paying a lot of attention to for reasons that will become clear in a few minutes. So for example, as you see on the slide, the United Nations in 2015 adopted the Sustainable Development Goals for the globe. And I'm standing in the way of the most important piece of these goals. That is goal number 6, which is on clean water and sustainability. So the global community is paying attention to this, as well as the U.S. government. So the U.S. government in 2012 issued a global water security report, and in December of 2017, just a few short months ago, the Trump administration issued America's global water strategy. So global water issues are things that, international institutions like the UN, as well as the US government, are keenly interested in because they affect real human beings, they affect politics, economics, as well as stability and livelihood of ordinary folks like yourself and mine. So on 22nd of March, the world celebrated World Water Day. And I'd like to share some basic facts around global water issues. So the global population, globally speaking, the people around the world are having more access to clean fresh water than ever before. So that access to clean fresh water is definitely increasing. Having said this, sanitation continues to be a serious problem. So something like 2.5 billion people around the world don't have access to basic sanitation, so the open defecation is an issue. With open defecation is a problem, I should say. With open defecation, of course, water contamination becomes a serious concern, and the vast majority of wastewater around the world is dumped into nature untreated. And on a daily basis, roughly 1,000 people, mostly children, die a day from preventable water and sanitation-related diseases. So when we think about water, what do you think about? You think about the glass of water they drink, you think about maybe the tea, the coffee, maybe the milk. And what else do you think about when you think about water? Is there a way to communicate?
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and have students turn and talk for about 30 seconds, and then we're going to choose have one person from each class report back. So go ahead, turn and talk, brainstorm some ideas about what you think about when you think about water.
In addition to what I mentioned.
You're going to have to unmute Wolf Point if you muted them.
Okay, we are going to go ahead and start with, let's go ahead and start with Wolf Point. Do you have an idea or two? Wolf Point, I can't hear you. Are you? There we go. Yes.
Good. Our mic is not working.
I
Good.
can hear you.
Oh, it says it's not working.
I can hear
Jack, what do you use it for?
I use water.
It's right here.
Hello. I use water for I take showers. I drink coffee. I drink a lot of coffee.
Brushing teeth? That's
Yeah,
one
brush
that came
my
up. You can scoot back, Jack. Thanks.
So let me ask the question a little bit differently, perhaps. What I'm getting at is, what do you think is by far the biggest consumer of water? Where do we, as a human society, use water the most?
Okay, so let's think about that one. Let's go to. I want to go to Bozeman for the next answer on this. So Wolf Point, go ahead and mute your microphone. And Bozeman, let's hear from you.
Agriculture? That's it?
Why do you?
Oh, because it takes a lot of water to grow plants and like raise farm animals.
There's an A+ there. So the vast majority of water that we use as a human society goes to the production of agriculture. Globally speaking, the average is 70% of all fresh water that people use goes to the production of agriculture. And in drier areas, so say Middle East, say Sub-Saharan Africa, places like that, some parts of California, that percentage goes from 70% all the way up to 85 and maybe even 90%. So the vast majority goes to production of food. So if you're looking at the global map in terms of countries that are water stressed, we see that the Middle East and North Africa and parts of Central Asia are very water stressed. And in terms of water stress, of course, is related to water scarcity. And in terms of water scarcity, we should think about physical scarcity and distinguish that from economic scarcity. So physical scarcity is what the word means, meaning there's just simply smaller, insufficient amounts of water for the population to meet their needs. So there's insufficient amounts of water for the population to meet their needs. That's what physical scarcity means. So you see that the Arabian Peninsula, North Africa, has extensive physical water scarcity, as well as parts of California. You have physical water scarcity. And you see some wet areas of Africa, and wet areas, the dark red, regions in Africa and the dark red regions in, say, western part of South America, they have economic water scarcity, and meaning the people are too poor to access fresh water. So it's economics that are the problem here, not water availability. So we as a human society have chosen a certain lifestyle, and this graphic in terms of water use, we have chosen a certain relationship with water. In terms of water use, on the far left hand side we see that it takes something like 800,000 gallons of water for one Palm Springs golf course for a day, and I need to move this way. And on the other hand, it takes something like 361 gallons of water for a single home, similar to the one that you and I live in. So 800,000 gallons to irrigate a golf course in a day, 361 gallons for our uses at home. But the golf course, you know, that could be your ticket to the White House. So.
I want to pause you really quickly. I'm curious with our students, just with a show of hands, have any of your communities experienced issues with water scarcity or drought? Okay, so it looks like definitely in Chinook and in Cut Bank as well, and Zenith Colony too, as well as Wolf Point, have all experienced issues of water scarcity.
So let me ask you, I hope the interaction would work well. Let me ask, what does water drought mean to you? What did it mean to your parents or to you personally? Because, you know, in a place that is as arid as Saudi Arabia, they'll be absolutely stunned to think that people in Montana have a drought, right?
Absolutely. So let's start with Chinook. Chinook, would you answer that question for us? And we'll also go to Wolf Point and Cut Bank and Zenith Colony in just a minute. So we'll hear from each of the schools. They'll raise their hands. Chinook, you need to unmute your microphone.
Can you repeat the question, please?
So the question is, what does drought mean to you or to your family? Because, and the reason why I'm asking this question is, somebody who lives in, say, Saudi Arabia or in Egypt or in sub-Saharan Africa would be absolutely shocked to think that people in Montana experience droughts. So the definition of drought varies, and I can go into that.
Yeah. So, yeah, let's go ahead and start with Chinook. Kathleen, did you mute Chinook? Chinook, you're muted at the moment. Zenith, we'll start with you while Chinook figures out the microphone issue.
Okay, we got it. Class, what do we need water for at our colony? Somebody? Crops and barley in our garden.
Have you experienced a drought?
Class? Yes.
And what does that mean? What does it look like? What does that mean for you?
What if there's a drought, Maria? What happens?
There are less crops and gardens.
So you have to get the vegetables from somewhere else? Mm-hmm. So tell them that.
There are less crops and we have to get our vegetables, and we have to buy our vegetables.
Excellent.
So that translates to an economic cost to your family.
Yes, for sure.
And a certain hardship.
Yes, financial hardship. Yes, when there's no crops.
Absolutely. Cut Bank, how about you? Can you respond to that?
Yes. Caitlin, go ahead. Yes. Yeah, just look into the camera.
Forest fires?
Ah, excellent point. Yeah.
Absolutely. That is definitely impact.
We have a lot of fires here when there's drought. Luckily this winter we've had a ton of snow, so we don't expect it, but we get forest fires that really affect the community and the crops for a long time. All the growing. Yes.
So
and then the water all goes to putting out the fires. Yeah.
So you should keep in mind that the landscape in Montana does not lend itself to a perception of drought. So drought, what does drought mean? Drought means precipitation that is lower than what that community or that region is typically experiences. So precipitation that is lower than normal for that particular region. So therefore, there is no statistical measure for drought per se, because it varies from community to community. The tolerance for drought varies from community to community. So a Saudi Arabian who would look at how much water Montana has would say that you have plenty of water, right? And that is primarily because the definition of, like I said, drought and the tolerance for drought varies from region to region. And part of that reason is part of the impact or relationship that we have with nature is we want to have golf courses in very arid regions, and there is a fabulous looking golf course in Dubai that is, I mean, it looks incredible, but it also is environmentally, it has a huge environmental footprint. I'm going to skip through this, and there was recently a report that was released on dirty fashion, and this has to do with the fact that the clothes that you and I wear, there's water that is embedded in the clothes that we wear. That's otherwise known as virtual water. So it takes a certain amount of water to make clothes and to make all the goods and services that we depend on. And there was a news article in the Texas Tribune that said that major Texas industrial facilities rank first nationally in illegal water pollution. In illegal water pollution, that kind of a reputational risk that industries are sometimes exposed to is not something that they welcome, and industries are paying more and more attention to negative media coverage of their industry by non-governmental organizations that are trying to essentially shame industries into being good environmental citizens. I think we're back. Okay, so as we said earlier, the vast majority of water globally, as well as in a place like California, goes to the production of agriculture, and it takes something like 15,000 liters of water to produce 2 pounds of beef, and 1,500 liters of water to produce 2 pounds of grain or of wheat. And an adult needs roughly 3,000 liters of water to produce enough food to satisfy our needs on a daily basis. And did you have a hamburger recently?
Thumbs up if you've had a hamburger recently.
Had a hamburger recently? And it takes 2,400 liters of water to make a hamburger. 2,400 liters of water. So a typical water bottle that a lot of us carry around is half a liter. So it takes, you just double that. So it takes roughly 5,000 of these bottles to make a hamburger. And meat consumption is
you can use
that's
this
a map
as a demonstration.
Yeah. So you need. Thank you. So we need 4,800 of these to make one hamburger. That's quite a bit of water, right? So here's a map of meat consumption per capita around the world. As you see, the wealthier countries, North America, Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, they have by far the highest consumption of meat per capita, and Mongolia stands out also here. They probably have a lot of meat produced locally, and so does South America. Again, the natural environment of South America lends itself to the production of meat.
I'm curious, can we pause for just a second with a show of hands? How many of your families make a living or are directly impacted by raising cattle or livestock?
Yeah,
I thought
of
so.
course.
Yeah, a lot.
And I think I'll skip this. So meat demand is expected to rise and rise sharply. And in developed countries, how do I get out of the way? In developed countries, okay, like the US, say, meat consumption is supposed to level off more or less. The thing is, in developing countries, as they become wealthier, they are going to be consuming a lot more meat. That is human nature. As people have more dollars in their pockets, they start consuming more meat. And what would the environmental impact of, say, China or maybe India consuming a lot more meat in the future than today? The environmental impacts will be immense. So the region that I study, the region that I would like to spend a few moments talking about, is this region. What's the name of this region? What's the name of this geographic region?
You can unmute your microphones.
The interaction is not as smooth.
I'm seeing some people mouthing out, especially down in Bozeman,
The Middle East, right?
Yep.
This is the Middle East. Yay! Okay, so the Middle East. Where is the Middle East? It's on the map, right? So the Middle East starts in Egypt.
Yeah, it's right behind you.
Right
behind you. Yep, like this.
Behind?
Yep.
Oh,
there you
I
go.
see. Okay. So it starts from Egypt all the way to Iran, from Turkey to Yemen. So that is the Middle East, okay? And as you see on the map, this is a map of annual precipitation. The dark green and yellow areas are areas that show the highest precipitation levels, and the yellow is a reflection of very little or no precipitation at all. So you see the vast majority of the Arabian Peninsula, where Saudi Arabia is, as much of Iraq receives very, very little precipitation. The area in Iraq, where you see the name Iraq and where you see the name Jordan, that entire region, all the way south to Yemen on the Indian Ocean in the south, it doesn't have a single permanently running river. And that is a large piece of real estate. So the people then in the Arabian Peninsula, where Saudi Arabia is, and the United Arab Emirates and Oman, they rely primarily on aquifers, underground water sources, and on desalination. The other complication about water issues in the Middle East is the fact that you have a few rivers that are international in nature. They cross boundaries, and the fact that the international rivers cross boundaries creates problems between who should get how much of that water, which country should get how much of that water, and what rules should we follow in terms of who should get how much. And you see on the there's a potential conflict between the countries that share the Nile River basin and the Tigris and Euphrates. I recently wrote a chapter on this potential conflict, and I don't know what we're doing for time. I want to make sure that
yeah, I think what we should do is maybe have an opportunity for questions for the students, and then move over to Jennifer, because Jennifer's going to talk a little bit more about our some local issues in Montana. So let's. Yeah, if it's okay, I'd like to open this up for questions, and we're going to go through each of the schools to have an opportunity to ask a question. Bozeman, I'm going to start with you today, and then we're going to move to Jennifer, who will give us more of a local perspective on water in Montana.
Questions?
Okay, Bozeman, you're on.
You're quiet. Don't be.
Up here?
Yeah, right back here. You can see yourself.
Oh, hi. I'm wondering if there's like an international right to water. Like, do you have the international civil, like, human right to have access to water?
You know, the UN adopted a resolution along that line fairly recently, in the last 5 years, I want to say. And yes, there is an acknowledgement that water is and should be a human right, access to some minimal amounts of water to sustain oneself. is a right. And again, there's the right to food, and just like there's, food and water are very closely linked. Good question.
Yes, we're going to go to Wolf Point, and then the next one will be Cut Bank, and then I'll let you know who's coming up. So Wolf Point, go ahead and ask your questions.
You're good. You're in frame.
What about desalinization? Like, what do you use aquifers for? You know, where do you get that money for that stuff? I don't really know what I'm saying.
One more. What is desalination?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's,
yeah.
Okay. No, I mean, that's a perfectly legitimate question. That's a good question. And desalinization is basically the desalting of seawater, right? And in arid regions that are economically strong, they have been building all kinds of desalination plants. And as you see here, the Middle East is a major area of concentration. Is a region that's heavily dependent on desalination plants, and so are parts of the U.S. I think there was another question embedded in what
you know what? Yeah, and I want to just keep us moving because I want to make sure that we get to Jennifer. So, said Cut Bank was next. We're going to go Cut Bank, Chinook, and then Zenith.
I can't be. Who has the most water in the world?
Who has the most water in the world? That's a difficult question to answer. So you talk about quantitatively. You know, Canada is a very big place. Russia is a very big place, and they have a lot of water. But you see, what you need to keep in mind, it's not about just having that water, it's having it in the right place at the right time. Meaning, they have a lot of water that is far away from where human settlement is. Having access to water is just as important as having physically water within your boundaries. So in other words, if you are dying of thirst, not dying of thirst, I mean, if you are extremely thirsty and water is, 5 blocks away, you can access it, but it's kind of in the neighborhood. It's at the 7-Eleven as opposed to in your own house. So easy access is a key part. So there are all kinds of rivers and lakes and glaciers in, say, Canada or Russia that are not easily accessible to human settlement further south in the country where the population live.
Excellent. Let's move to Chinook. Chinook, what's your question? Chinook, I'm not sure why we're having trouble hearing you today, but what we can certainly do is you can email us the questions too, and we can ask them that way. Let's go ahead and move over to the Zenith Colony.
Hey, Peter, turn around this loud.
Has there ever been a war because of water?
Sorry?
Say it again louder.
Has there ever been a war because of water?
Yes, there have been wars because of water. So that's the short answer is yes. And we need to keep in mind the following, though. The vast majority of water conflicts, water disagreements, are resolved peacefully. Okay? So while the possibility of a water war is definitely there, it's not as likely. So let me give you an example, something I tell my own students. Montana borders Canada, obviously. So, and there are trans-boundary water issues between Canada and the U.S. There are rivers and aquifers that cross the border between the two countries. So personally, given what I know about Canada and the U.S., I don't think Canada and the U.S. will ever have a water war. Okay? Now think of the globe as a game. We move Canada out of its place and we put North Korea as a neighbor of Montana. Then the likelihood of war water war would increase significantly. Why is that? Because there's bad blood between the two countries. There is just history of animosity and distrust and things like that. So what I'm getting at is it's not just water that would trigger war. Water would be one of many reasons that would contribute to war.
Well, thank you so much, and I would like to introduce Jennifer Schoonen from the Blackfoot Challenge, and then we'll bring you back on at the end for a last round of questions. So, let's see. I'm going to take this. We'll get Jennifer all set up here. Where are we? All right, the Blackfoot Challenge. Thanks, Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. So Dr. Amery was here to give you a global, worldwide perspective about water. I'm here to talk very local. So as Ali said, my name is Jennifer. I work for an organization called the Blackfoot Challenge. We're a local watershed group founded by landowners in a watershed in west central Montana. Just before I kind of put a marker up so you can see where we are, I'm just wondering how many of you have ever been to the Blackfoot River in western Montana, just by show of hands. Awesome. So some of you are familiar. So on the slide behind me is a picture of the Blackfoot River, and this is the landscape where I work. We have about 7 communities in our landscape and 9,000 people scattered over about 1.5 million acres. So not a lot of people and a pretty good sized landscape. Just to give you a sense, the red outline shows the Blackfoot Watershed in Montana. So this is where I work locally with people on all sorts of natural resource issues, but my particular focus is on water. So I'm wondering if, and I would love to hear you guys provide your answers, if you guys all know, first by show of hands, what watershed you live in. Do you know the name of your local watershed that provides water for your communities? So maybe we could get some of them to identify their local watershed.
Let's go through this. We're going to go Wolf Point, Cut Bank, Bozeman, Zenith, and Chinook. So Wolf Point, what is your watershed?
Am I doing it then? Yeah. Hi! They're a little too bashful. We were thinking that Fort Peck Dam area is where we're getting most of our water supply.
Awesome. Missouri River, right? Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Cut Bank, you're gonna send me that. Bozeman, where do you get your water? All right, you guys be ready to go when I call you. We've got Zenith up next and then Chinook. So Bozeman, where do you get your water?
Yeah, sorry about that. We get most of our water from Highlight Reservoir, but I don't know what the name of the watershed is.
Okay, I know the answer to this one. What's your big river in Bozeman?
The sourdough.
Bozeman River.
Gallatin. Thank you. Good job.
All right, Zenith, where does your water come from?
Anna.
A well. You guys are using groundwater. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. And then let me think. Who did I miss? Oh, Cut Bank. Where did you get your water from?
You guys tell me. St. Mary's Cut Bank Creek. Cut Bank Creek.
Good job.
Cut
And
Bank
we have
Creek.
Chinook. Did we get Chinook?
Chinook, I think needs to. Yeah. Oh, they have something on there. A little closer, my friend. Come a little closer to the camera. This is creativity at its best. The
Awesome.
Milk River.
So Dr. Amery was just talking about shared water with Canada. You guys share water with Canada along the Milk River, and there are organizations that work across both boundaries to make sure that water source is protected and taken care of. So this is a little bit of a repeat of some of what you heard at the global level, but I'm curious about your thoughts about why water is important locally and what our concerns might be in the Blackfoot Watershed, in the Gallatin, in the Milk River. What are the reasons and uses for our water that that make it a priority for us? And I might just move you through this because we've already kind of answered it. So
go ahead.
We've talked about agriculture and irrigation as a big use of water. Dr. Amery had a statistic that said 70% of our water is consumed for irrigation or agricultural use. How much do you think we use in Montana? So I would like you guys to throw some numbers out.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go ahead and start with Cut Bank. Do you have a guess? We're going to go Cut Bank, Bozeman, Zenith, and Wolf Point.
How much water do you think we use here?
How much water do you think we use
No, you have to
For
tell me.
agriculture in Montana.
What percentage?
Oh, what percentage of water do we use here for agriculture? 80%, 90%, 50%?
I would say like 90.
I got an 80.
I got an 80. Okay.
Okay.
I like it. Let's go ahead and move to Bozeman. Bozeman, what percentage do you guys think? I actually 85%. Okay.
Okay.
How about Zenith? What do you think?
Maria. Okay, Maria.
85.
85. Another 85.
Okay.
Wolf Point. We'll just go to Wolf Point, and then I bet Chinook's gonna. Oh, Chinook thinks 87%.
Okay.
At Wolf Point, what about you? Oh, big discussion. I don't have a prize. I apologize. I wish I had a prize.
Sorry, no prize.
All right, Jennifer, what is it?
Okay, we're going to flip through. This is my watershed. The Blackfoot is part of the Clark Fork and Kootenai Basin in western Montana. Irrigation, as you see, is the biggest part of the pie here, 92%. That figure rings true for much of Montana. So we use a lot, the huge majority of our water for irrigation purposes. And so it's an important consideration when we think about the foundation of our economy with agriculture, farming, ranching, raising cows, raising hay, those sorts of things. So this is where much of our water is going. So when we think locally, we think about a lot of priorities, and you guys are in different communities, and there's different priorities in your communities. But I think we, in general, in Montana, have some similar ideas about why being good stewards of our water resources is important. So let's talk about some of the important reasons we value our water supplies. This one. Maybe Bozeman, you guys can relate to this one because it's such a destination for people coming to visit for fishing. This is a bull trout. Bull trout are threatened species in our part of the world, and it's a big part of why we manage and take care of the water in the Blackfoot Watershed. We also are pretty focused on habitat for West Slope cutthroat trout. So fish habitat, sort of that natural environment that Montana is so well known for. This one we've talked about a lot. So agriculture, irrigated agriculture, growing hay crops, creating good pasture feed for cows. This is an important priority for us in the Blackfoot. It's the foundation of our economy in the Blackfoot, agriculture and then recreation, which I'll show you next. So people come to visit us in Montana in many of our communities, and they spend money at the local store, and they buy gas, and they stay at the local hotel and eat at the local cafe so that they can do this. So they can float and fish and enjoy our beautiful rivers and natural environment. So recreation is a big piece of why we're concerned about the future of our water in Montana. And then there's this one. So we are pretty lucky. We have lots of diverse wildlife. The Blackfoot Watershed is pretty special. The whole complement that were there when Lewis and Clark came to our part of the world. So these are trumpeter swans. We have had a program in the last few years to try and reintroduce them to our watershed, and they're now thriving there. You guys might recognize the guy in the lower photo there. Does anybody recognize who that might be? That's Governor Bullock. But more importantly, next to him is a teacher. And surrounded by her are her students. And so this is one way that those kids and that teacher get a sense of what's important in the watershed with their water sources. And so they come to our swan release every year and help to turn those birds out into the local wetlands. So when you think about concerns locally, we have similar concerns that they do at the global level. Can someone tell me what concern we might be seeing here?
What do you think, Wolf Point? What do you think?
I see a hand at the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
Trout. Water.
Awesome.
Trout.
Yep. This is the Musselshell River, which is an amazing place, but has experienced a lot of drought in recent decades. It's also what we call over-appropriated. So that means more water has been sort of given out to the water users than really is physically available in the river. So this is an important consideration for us. We have to deal with drought and sort of adapt in a lot of ways and figure out how we change our own practices locally to continue to be sustainable in our local communities when we have something like drought. So let's talk a little bit more about local drought. So you guys many of you have identified that you've experienced drought in your local areas, and you kind of know what that seems like. Part of my job is to work with landowners on responding to drought. So when we have a drought year in the Blackfoot, we have a program that allows landowners, irrigators, ranchers, and farmers to voluntarily conserve water so that we keep some water in stream to protect fish habitat, but that we're also sharing the burden of that drought. So there's not one community or another that's unfairly impacted by a drought in that situation. So we've been managing this drought program since the year 2000, so last 18 years. By a show of fingers, I want you guys to let me know how many years out of the last 18, and I realize nobody has 18 fingers, but just give me a sense of how many years out of the last 18 we've had the Blackfoot Watershed. Just throw up your fingers and give me a guess. I got 5.
Nope, got some
10s.
Lots of 10s.
Yeah. So you guys are guessing pretty well, and it's kind of an unfair question unless you're willing to hold up some toes. We've had 12 years of drought in the last 18 in the Blackfoot Watershed. So that kind of tells you something about what's happening in western Montana. We're seeing some changes in the way our comes to us, and we, as most of you know, we depend on snow up high, and this has been a great year for us, and we expect if anything, flooding versus drought, but that happens less and less for us. And so our snowmelt comes off earlier in the year, it comes off really fast, and by July, when farmers are trying to get water on to get their hay crop finished up, we're seeing a lot of our water start to go away, and we're seeing drought happen earlier and earlier in the summer than ever before. So the supply is something we're thinking about, how we conserve it, how we adjust when we're farming and when we're growing things and when we're cutting things are all important considerations right now as we think about managing for that water supply changing. So you've seen a lot of sort of negative and sometimes scary things. It keeps me up at night thinking about what's happening with our water. But there's really some great ways you guys and your communities can get involved. And that's part of what our organization does in being a community-based organization working on water issues, among others. So here's one way people get involved. We recruit volunteers. This is also my sneaky way of getting my daughter into the slideshow. She's the blonde there. We have issues in Montana recently with the potential of aquatic invasive mussels, and that's what that upper picture is, mussels, which could devastate our water infrastructure in this state if we got a true infestation of them. It would affect water quality, it would affect the recreation experience, it can mess with irrigation systems. So we've been monitoring in our watershed to make sure these little critters aren't getting introduced into our watershed. And one way we do that is we recruit community volunteers, so people get involved in these projects. They learn the science, they learn about the water quality of our lakes and rivers, and they gain a stronger appreciation for participating in that process.
Jennifer, I'm curious, has anybody ever been stopped at a boat check station?
Yes.
You have. How about students? Raise a hand.
Yeah, let's see. You guys gone through a station? Yep, I see some
I would
hands.
imagine, yeah, especially, yep, there we go. Good. This is what they're looking for. Or, well.
Right, yeah. So this is one of those cross-boundary issues with Canada also, because Canada has mussel-free status, and so they are really wanting to make sure that the mussels don't move into the Columbia River Basin and west of here. And so that's one reason we're doing this, is to be good partners with downstream states and with our neighbors to the north. So here's just another monitoring opportunity. We work with, these are kids from Helmville School. there, and then an adult citizen science volunteer, we call them. And again, it's one way that we get people out. They're measuring stream flows to better understand what the changes are in the patterns of our stream flows, when there's water, when there's not water, how much. And then we're also testing for water quality. So is there too much sediment in the water? Are there nutrients in the water that could impact fish and fish habitat? So having that knowledge, that local knowledge, helps us to better work with our communities and our community members on how to respond. And so how we can be good partners with private landowners and with the agencies that manage public lands to make a difference for that sort of long-term stewardship of our watersheds. These guys. So this is kind of a new thing for us. So it turns out nature's really good at what nature should be doing, and beavers are little natural sort of water engineers. And beaver dams help store water, they slow it down, they improve water quality, and with beavers on the landscape, we see that stream flows last longer into the summer. So it helps that water slow down and continue to flow through the tributaries and keep a water supply going at times of year when, even if it's a dry summer, we might have seen streams downstream drying up. So in a lot of places, beavers have disappeared from the landscape. And so one of the things people are doing is trying to imitate or mimic them. And so the people in the upper picture here are building a beaver mimicry dam to try and have that same impact. And so thinking about ways we can adapt and store water and sort of slow it down and parse it out a little bit differently so that we are more resilient. And that's a big word in the water world lately, is just resilience, being more resilient with our water. So really, when it comes down to it, it's about people. So it's about people like you guys. It's about the landowners in the Blackfoot and in the Gallatin and along the Milk River and all across the state who really make a commitment to work together and do good things for their watersheds. And so I would love to put a question out to you guys just to consider, what do you think you can do or members of your community can do to be good stewards of your local watershed?
Yeah. So let's go ahead and think about that for a few seconds. And then what I'd like to do is I'd like to bring Dr. Amery back up, and then we'll answer that question, and then they'll have an opportunity to ask either Jennifer or Dr. Amery a question or two. So come on over. It looks like we have, oh, I see Columbus. Fantastic. So we've got Wolf Point, Columbus, Chinook, and Cut Bank that are left. I know some of our schools had to drop out. Let's go ahead and start with Wolf Point. So we'll go Wolf Point, Columbus, Chinook, and Cut Bank. And Chinook, I'm liking your writing technique. So go ahead and write that down for us. Go ahead, Wolf Point. Oh, don't be shy, Wolf Point. I promise we don't bite.
Can I ask you a question in the meantime as they get ready?
Yes.
Okay. Can you comment on the fact that apparently a dam was removed recently in Montana? And your thoughts on small dams, beaver-sized dams versus mega dams?
Right. So you're probably referring to the Milltown Dam outside Missoula. Yeah, and that was a major Superfund project, so a water quality issue based on mining history upstream from there that, you know, there was contaminated soils and things, and so then they also wanted to free up the Clark Fork River, obviously. So in terms of water development projects, we don't, the idea of beaver mimicry dams versus hard human created infrastructure are very different here because of water rights. So the opportunity to put in infrastructure, human built, like, you know, concrete and metal, those kinds of things, is very limited. Right. But the state has recently put rules in place that allow the more temporary looking beaver mimicry dams, because it's not viewed as holding water away from downstream water users or creating a new water storage system. It's simply viewed as a slowing down of the system.
So if you zoom out from my perspective, from the global perspective, broadly speaking, beaver mimicry dams, or I think of them as micro dams, have a lot less human and environmental impact.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, so let's go. Wolf Point, are you ready?
All right, guys, what can we do to protect our water?
Reduce the water usage, and be able to save water in case a drought happens.
Yeah, so I don't know if you could hear that, but he says reduce our water usage.
Yep, absolutely. Excellent. Do you have a question for either of our presenters? We can come back to you as well.
I just might throw a comment out really quick on in response to the reduced water usage. One of the things we're looking at, because we're not going to necessarily make more water unless we see dramatic changes in the climate trends in our area, is we're looking at ways we can improve the health of our soil. And so in an agriculture state, this is really important. Soil has the ability to hold water better than it does. If it has more organic matter, it's healthier, it holds water better. And so we're looking at ways to work with farmers to improve the soil health as a way to sort of trap and hold water, and also use more drought-tolerant crops.
So there are crops that are, like you said, drought tolerant, that can and that are being developed in labs, and lots of different communities are considering those, and some are adopting those. There's actually some really neat research on grain that you don't need to sow every year. That sort of stays in the soil and produces grain every year.
Wow.
Right?
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Let's go to Columbus. Columbus, we haven't heard from you. Columbus, are you there?
Tell them they can type.
You can type in too, and Kathleen will relay your answers to me. Chinook, let me see that board of yours.
There we go.
Okay, come closer, my dear. We can help our area. Oh, hold it up over your head. Yep. By stopping pollution.
Excellent point. How do we do that?
Oh my goodness.
Excellent point. We need to do that for sure.
I know. So let's think about it. I see you have another board that's in the background waiting to come up. Would you like to share that board with us as well? Oh, communication.
Wow.
Ooh.
That's a humanities major.
Yes. What is the longest time that we in Montana have had water restrictions?
Ooh. I would have to get back to you on that, Chinook. For us, water restrictions tend to be a summertime thing. So we look from July, August, September in how our drought response program works in the Blackfoot. So I would say we're seeing those happen earlier and longer, but it's very seasonal, right? We still in Montana tend to see rain in the fall, and then, depend on that winter snowpack to kind of help us rebound before the spring.
Are there global restrictions that you know about in areas that are seasonal?
The problem with water, globally speaking, is that the agricultural lobby, California, Colorado, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and elsewhere, agricultural lobbies tend to be fairly influential in government. So they affect policies in ways that, in the following ways. Primarily, they influence governments to get them to subsidize the use of water.
Got it.
So water, globally speaking, is heavily subsidized and therefore used sometimes in not very economical ways.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, we're going to move to Cut Bank.
Here you go, Ebony. Come on, Ebony, look up into the screen. You can tell him. Oh,
Which group is this?
keep the resolution.
High school.
You gotta be louder.
we keep the rivers clean and moving.
To keep the rivers clean and moving without dams.
What are the four? Are there 4 C's that we need to be aware of, or 3 C's? The clear,
clean, cold,
connected. That sounds about right.
Cold and connected.
Clear, yeah, cold and connected. Yes, absolutely.
And then,
good point. Go ahead, Melanie.
We have a student that wants to say what he does in his house.
So what we do is, in my house, is we fill up a container, a big container, and then we put it in our basement, in the coldest part of our basement. And we let it sit there until we need it when it gets super hot out in the summertime. And then we use it.
That's one strategy, saving water.
Okay.
That's a great strategy. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm seeing there we're losing classes. We are even over a few minutes of time. So with just a show of hands, are there any final questions that you have? Oh, I see a thank you there written on the board.
Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, you know what I do? Because we do need our presenters have other places to be. If you have other questions, Chinook, would you email those to me and I will pass them on to our presenters. And we would love to answer those questions. We had an exceptionally large amount of schools on today. This is a very popular topic, which is awesome, but it also means that we have less time for individual questioning. So thank you so much today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We'll see you later.
Good talking to you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.